Have you ever found yourself caught in an emotional current so intense it felt less like a connection and more like a restrictive chain limiting your true self? What if the key to profound freedom isn't about shutting down your emotions, but about mastering the art of letting go, transforming intense attachments into sources of genuine strength and tranquility? And what if, by embracing ancient wisdom, you could cultivate an inner space of unwavering peace, allowing you to navigate life's complexities with conscious choice and clear insight? Many of us experience moments where our emotions seem to control us more than we control them. However, I'm here to share an encouraging perspective. It is entirely possible to move towards profound change. In this discussion, we will dive into ancient yet timeless concepts, learning to detach from heavy emotional ties. By examining the thoughts and teachings of wise thinkers, we will discover how to cultivate a space of freedom within ourselves. You will be guided through effective practices to lighten your mind of any unnecessary weight, allowing you to focus on what is truly essential in your life. From recognition to reflection, and by redefining our connections, this journey is a gateway to a new way of living. If the idea of breaking free from the shackles of emotional attachment resonates with you, you are in the right place. This exploration is an invitation to redefine how and to what we choose to attach ourselves. Finding harmony between letting go and preserving what truly enriches our existence. Prepare to discover that even within the complexity of our emotions lies the possibility of consciously choosing our path, a path that is free and enlightened. Let's begin by exploring the power of detachment. Why is it so crucial, in your opinion? When we cling too tightly to people or situations, it begins to control us. It's as if you hand over the remote control of your emotions to someone else, allowing them to change the channel at will. Their influence can then regulate your joy, your sadness, and in extreme situations can even push you to make impulsive decisions. Detachment, however, does not mean ceasing to care about others. Instead, it implies giving the appropriate weight to what is beyond our control. Imagine your emotions as a kite. This might seem unexpected, but it's a telling image. Each string attached to something or someone symbolizes a potential direction where your emotions can be carried away. If you hold too many strings or tighten one string too much, you are at the mercy of the wind. Stoicism shows us the importance of loosening our grip. It teaches us that even if we cannot control the wind, we can choose which strings to hold. This doesn't make you cold or distant, but rather deeply grounded and resilient. Let us now identify what or whom we might be too attached to. Then ask yourself why. Are you seeking validation? Is it the fear of loneliness or something else entirely? Understanding the origin of your attachment is the first step towards liberation from its grip. Now commit to engaging in activities that provide you with a sense of purpose and satisfaction, perhaps a neglected passion or spending time with someone who genuinely enriches your existence. Detachment in its purest form frees you from the chains of attachment by teaching you that attachment often stems from our ego. By returning to fundamental truths, we realize that at our core, we are beings of love. Think of the purity of a newborn radiating joy, still untouched by the intricacies of the ego. With time, however, our ego takes the reins, cluttering our existence with attachments. These ties, whether to people or ideals, obscure our judgment and distance us from our original essence, love. Detachment, in its purest form, liberates us from the chains of attachment by showing us that the latter often originates from our ego. By returning to the essential, we realize that deep within us, we are beings of love. Think of the purity of a newborn overflowing with joy, still untouched by the complications of the ego. With time, however, our ego takes control, cluttering our life with attachments. But it is here that we must clearly understand that attachment is the work of the ego, denying love and inner satisfaction. By observing our desires and our ties from this perspective, we begin to discern the superfluous weight they add to our lives. To illustrate this point and help you truly understand, I'd like to tell you a story that many of us might recognize. Imagine you're in high school and you develop a huge crush on someone. Your ego becomes intensely attached to the idea of being with this person, to the point where your happiness seems to depend entirely on their reciprocation. One day you gather all your courage and declare your feelings, but the response isn't what you hoped for. You're rejected. It's a huge blow. You feel miserable, convinced that you'll never find love. But with time and reflection, you realize that your attachment to this person and to this specific outcome was excessive. Your ego had tied your sense of self-worth and happiness to this single potential relationship, making you vulnerable to disappointment and suffering. By learning to detach from this need for external validation, you begin to find a deeper, more lasting satisfaction within yourself. You realize that your value doesn't depend on this person's approval, but comes from something far more fundamental, your capacity to love and be loved. This experience teaches you a valuable lesson about the pitfalls of attachment and the freedom of detachment. Of course, you continue to aspire to love and relationships, but you no longer depend on them to feel complete and worthy. This is just one example among others, but I hope it illustrates how untangling our egoistic attachments can open us up to a life more rooted in love, trust, and authentic fulfillment. Have you ever had a similar experience, a moment where letting go of an attachment allowed you to reconnect with something greater and truer within yourself? Don't hesitate to share your story in the comments. We all have so much to learn from each other on this path of detachment and self-discovery. So how do we begin this liberation from the anchors that hold us back? Let's start by closely examining the origin of our attachment. See it clearly. It often emanates from our ego seeking security and validation. The first step towards change lies in this awareness. Then understand that your intrinsic worth does not depend on this attachment. Your essence, your heart, is sufficient in itself. This realization doesn't happen instantly. It's the fruit of deliberate practice of a conscious choice to prioritize your inner peace over the quest for external recognition. Also, embrace the concept of abundance. By letting go of the fear of loss, the universe sometimes compensates for the loss in unexpected ways, sometimes even beyond our hopes. Detachment does not mean less affection or care. On the contrary, it results from a better understanding and a more faithful alignment with your true essence, allowing love, not fear, to guide your steps. The journey towards detachment is transformative. It involves stripping away the layers of the ego to reveal the resilience of the loving soul that lies beneath. This journey leads you towards a lighter existence, freed from the burden of attachment, ready to welcome new blessings with open arms and an open heart. Let's return to the illusion of the ego, which can sometimes persuade us that we are not good enough or that what others possess is better than what we have. This false belief often encourages us to seek emotional validation from others, to idealize certain people by placing them on a pedestal as if they held something we cannot grasp. Yet in the decisive moments of existence, it becomes clear that no one holds special privileges. We are all equally vulnerable, profoundly human. It is important to deconstruct this illusion, to expose it for what it truly is: unreal, and not to let this false perception alter our view of ourselves or others. On the subject of self-confidence and inner healing, remember that you are exceptional, special, and unique, not out of ego or pretense, but by a fundamental truth. There is no one else exactly like you in this universe. Your unique combination of talents, experiences, perspectives, and qualities makes you irreplaceable. Recognizing and embracing this uniqueness is not a matter of vanity, but of authentic self-appreciation. It is the basis of true self-confidence that does not depend on external validation or comparison with others. Developing healthy self-esteem and nurturing your inner child is a beneficial practice. This does not, however, mean that we must perceive ourselves as superior to others or detach ourselves from the collective fabric of humanity. On the contrary, it means recognizing that although our paths are distinct, none is superior to the others. Each story is a unique thread in the vast tapestry of life, each thread having equivalent importance. When you realize that you are unique, you begin to understand that your value is intrinsic. It does not depend on your achievements, your appearance, or your status. It is inherent in your very being. This understanding can be profoundly liberating and healing. It allows you to accept and love yourself unconditionally with all your strengths and weaknesses. It gives you permission to be imperfect while aspiring to grow and evolve. So I invite you to take a moment to truly integrate this truth. Repeat after me, I am unique. Say it out loud or write it in the comments below. Let this affirmation anchor itself within you, not as an egoistic boast, but as a profound recognition of your intrinsic worth. By sharing this affirmation, you not only take a step towards your own healing, but you also encourage others to embrace their own uniqueness. Imagine the power of a community where everyone feels truly seen, appreciated, and valued for who they are. So don't hesitate. Affirm your uniqueness here and now, and observe how this simple declaration begins to change your perception of yourself and your place in the universe. Now let's continue. When we talk about detachment, particularly in relationships, it's easy to get carried away by a feeling of lack, fearing to lose someone we consider unique and irreplaceable. This thought pattern finds its roots in the ego, which whispers false ideas about scarcity and limitation to us. Emotional detachment is not about denying our feelings or becoming insensitive, but about embracing the abundance the universe has to offer, as well as our own capacity to love. It's about recognizing that even if a person can hold a special place in our heart, our well-being does not depend on their presence. Through this realization, we are freed from attachments based on fear, allowing us to love with freedom without desperately clinging. This naturally brings us into resonance with Stoic philosophy, learning to see every individual, including oneself, with a gaze of equality. Everyone we meet, everyone we love, and even those we might lose, have a role to play in our lives, just as we have a role in theirs. However, understanding that no role is absolutely crucial fosters a deep emotional resilience within us, preparing us to face life's uncertainties with grace. For those who have been following this channel for a while, you know that the Stoics show us the importance of focusing on what we can control: our perceptions, our actions, and our decision-making capacity. By doing so, we experience true liberation, learning to navigate life with serenity and deep assurance. Concretely, this means being ready to leave behind past experiences and relationships that no longer serve us. It's a bit like holding a rope so tightly that it becomes painful while being afraid to let go for fear of the unknown. Imagine you've been holding this rope for so long that your hands have become numb. You've almost forgotten what it feels like to live without this constant tension. Perhaps this rope represents a toxic relationship, an unsatisfying job, or a limiting belief about yourself. Your ego tells you that you need this rope, that without it you would be lost. But in reality, this rope is holding you back. It prevents you from being free, from exploring new possibilities, from being fully yourself. Letting go can seem frightening at first. After all, this rope has become a familiar part of your life, even if it causes you suffering. But imagine for a moment the relief, the freedom you would feel by finally loosening your grip. Yes, there would be an adjustment period. Your hands might be a little numb at first, unaccustomed to this new freedom. But little by little, you would learn to live without this tension, to trust yourself without this false crutch. This is the process of detachment, letting go of these ropes that keep us tied to unhealthy patterns, to unrealistic expectations, to limited versions of ourselves. It's trusting that even without these ropes, we are not lost. On the contrary, we are finally free to be who we truly are. Detachment requires courage, patience, and compassion towards oneself, but the rewards are worth it. A life lived with more authenticity, peace, and resilience. So perhaps you can take a moment to reflect. What are the ropes you are holding so tightly that they hurt you? What is preventing you from letting them go? And what could you discover about yourself and about life if you were willing to loosen your grip even just a little? Remember, you are not alone in this process. We are all learning to let go, to trust, to embrace the unknown. And it is by sharing our experiences and supporting each other that we find the strength to continue. So don't hesitate to share your thoughts or experiences of detachment in the comments. Your story could be the light someone else needs to find the courage to let go in turn. Once I stopped losing myself in the narratives of others and began to live my own life, fear lost its grip on me. Not knowing every detail of someone else's life does not mean you are missing something in your own existence. On the contrary, it means you are fully present in your life, creating memorable moments that belong exclusively to you. It's easy to become attached to a false image of happiness, especially in our interconnected world, where we are constantly exposed to carefully curated versions of other people's lives. Seeing people display their perfect lives on social media can provoke the fear of falling behind or never achieving what they seem to possess. This fear can make letting go very difficult. However, it is essential to remember that the grass always seems greener from afar. When you get closer, you realize that it too has its imperfections. The same applies to other people's lives. What we see from the outside is often just a facade, hiding the struggles and challenges that everyone must face. In reality, no one has a perfect life, even if appearances sometimes suggest otherwise. Everyone has their own insecurities, their own fears, and their own battles to fight. But these aspects are rarely highlighted, especially in a world where perfection is valued. When we compare ourselves to others, we often compare ourselves to an illusion, to an idealized version of reality, and this comparison can be extremely damaging to our self-esteem and well-being. So how do we free ourselves from this tendency to compare and from the fear of missing out on something? It starts by refocusing on your own life, on your own values, and your own goals. It's about recognizing that your path is unique and cannot be compared to that of someone else. It's also about learning to appreciate the small moments in your life, those that may not be Instagram-worthy, but are deeply meaningful to you. It's cultivating gratitude for what you have rather than focusing on what you think you lack. And it's remembering that true satisfaction comes from living in accordance with your own values, not from the approval or envy of others. When you anchor yourself in who you are and what truly matters to you, the need to compare naturally fades. Of course, it's a process. It takes practice to disengage from these patterns of comparison and fear. But every small step in this direction is a step towards more freedom and fulfillment. So perhaps you can take a moment to reflect. How has comparing yourself to others affected your own sense of happiness and satisfaction? What are the things in your life that you could appreciate more if you focused less on what others seem to have? Now let's talk about what truly matters in life. By finding the answer to this question, we can free ourselves from everything that unnecessarily burdens us and find true emotional freedom. This is super important when trying to distance yourself from someone, and it's a key idea in Stoic philosophy. Be careful, it's not about coldly cutting ties, but rather about realizing that our most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves. It's easy to believe that our happiness depends on someone's presence, that our value increases when they approve of us and decreases when they ignore us. But this way of thinking traps us, making all our potential dependent on the goodwill of someone else. It's like a bird believing it needs permission to fly. By doing this, we limit our emotional space. Imagine instead that you realize the sky has always been wide open, just waiting for you to spread your wings in your own way. This independence is a great lesson in freedom. It teaches us that our value does not depend on the judgment of others or their presence in our lives. Detaching, therefore, does not mean rejecting the other, but rather getting closer to who we truly are. It means focusing on our personal development to become the best version of ourselves, and that's how we gradually free ourselves from the crushing weight of needing the other. Take a garden, for example. You don't beg a flower to grow. You care for the soil, you water it carefully, and you trust the natural process. Well, it's the same when we take care of ourselves. By working on our personal fulfillment, we create an inner environment that flourishes whether someone else is there to see it or not. And this self-care becomes a source of autonomous, solid, and truly gratifying happiness. It's a super powerful shift in perspective. Instead of seeking approval externally, we learn to find it within ourselves. Instead of clinging to specific relationships, we cherish the lessons and evolution they bring us. Of course, this doesn't mean that relationships aren't important. Human connections are a precious part of life. But by first anchoring our value within ourselves, we can experience these relationships from a place of fullness rather than lack. It's an entire journey that we work on every day. Some days, it will be easier to remember our intrinsic worth. Other days, we will have to consciously choose to detach ourselves from the opinions and expectations of others. But each time we choose to get closer to ourselves, we strengthen our muscle of self-love and emotional autonomy. We anchor ourselves more and more in our own truth, being less dependent on external validation. And from this space of inner fullness, we become capable of loving and connecting more deeply, not out of need, but out of the pure desire to share our light. Here's another piece of advice for cultivating this emotional autonomy and healthy detachment. Learn to validate your own emotions. Often when we experience something difficult, our first instinct is to seek validation externally. We want someone else to tell us that what we feel is normal, understandable, legitimate. It's human. We all need to feel understood and supported. But the problem is that if we always depend on this external validation, we give others enormous power over our emotional well-being. We find ourselves at the mercy of their availability, their ability to understand, their willingness to support us. The key is to learn to validate our own emotions. It's about developing that benevolent and understanding inner voice that can tell us what you're feeling right now is completely normal. It's okay to feel this way. I'm here for you. It's a bit like becoming our own best friend, our own support figure. Instead of desperately seeking this validation externally, we learn to find it within ourselves. Concretely, this can mean taking a moment to really listen to our emotions without judgment, welcoming them, naming them, letting them exist without trying to change them right away. We can tell ourselves things like, "I see you're sad right now. It's normal to feel that in this situation. I'm here with you. We'll get through this together." Or, "I feel a lot of anger in you. It's a valid emotion. It has the right to be there. Let's breathe together, welcome it, and see what it's trying to tell us." By doing this, we strengthen our emotional validation muscle. We learn to be there for ourselves in good times and bad, and little by little, we become less dependent on the validation of others. Of course, this doesn't mean we no longer need external support. Friends, family therapy, all of that remains valuable and important. But it becomes a bonus, a supplement, rather than an absolute necessity. And from this place of emotional autonomy, we can enter relationships in a healthier, more balanced way. We can share our emotions with others, not for them to validate them, but to create authentic connection. We can support others not out of obligation, but out of choice and love. So the next time you experience a strong emotion, try to take a moment to validate it yourself. Be your own best friend, your own source of support, and observe how this practice over time helps you detach from external expectations and judgments. Remember, your emotions are valid and important simply because they are yours. You have the right to feel them, to listen to them, to honor them, and each time you do, you strengthen your emotional autonomy. Learn to forgive yourself. We are often our own harshest critics. When we make a mistake, when we don't live up to our own expectations, we can be really hard on ourselves. We judge ourselves, we blame ourselves, we dwell on our failures. But this harshness towards ourselves only reinforces our dependence on external approval. If we can't accept and forgive ourselves, we desperately seek someone else to do it for us. Self-forgiveness is therefore an essential key to emotional detachment. It's about learning to treat ourselves with the same compassion and understanding we would offer a close friend. Concretely, this can mean stepping back when we catch ourselves judging ourselves harshly. It's remembering that we are human, that we all make mistakes, that learning comes through failure. We can tell ourselves things like, "Okay, I made a mistake. It's normal. It happens to everyone. What can I learn from this situation to do better next time?" Or, "I see I'm judging myself very harshly, but would I talk to a friend like that? So why am I treating myself this way?" It's about developing a softer, more understanding inner dialogue, remembering that we're doing our best with the resources we have, and that's the most important thing. Of course, this doesn't mean we don't take responsibility for our mistakes. Self-forgiveness is not an excuse to continue behaving in a damaging way. Rather, it's a way to free ourselves from paralyzing shame and guilt so that we can move forward and grow. And when we learn to forgive ourselves, we become less dependent on the forgiveness of others. We no longer need them to constantly reassure us, to tell us we're okay, because we've learned to tell ourselves that. It's a process, a daily practice. Some days it will be easier to look at ourselves with compassion. Other days we will have to consciously choose to forgive ourselves, even if a part of us resists. But every act of self-forgiveness is a step towards more emotional autonomy. It's a way of telling ourselves, "I'm here for myself even in difficult moments. I love and support myself no matter what." And from this place of self-compassion, we become more capable of truly being there for others. We can support and forgive them not out of a need for reciprocity, but out of pure generosity of heart. So the next time you catch yourself judging yourself harshly, take a moment to practice self-forgiveness. Remember that you're doing your best, and that's the most important thing. Learn to let go of the need to control. One of the greatest sources of unhealthy emotional attachment is our compulsive desire to control everything. We want to control situations, people, events to reassure ourselves to feel secure. But this illusory quest for total mastery only binds us further to our fears and anxieties. Because ultimately, how many things in life truly escape our grasp? Healthy emotional detachment comes from accepting that the universe follows its course according to laws beyond our limited understanding, that certain unforeseen events, certain changes, certain aspects of others will always elude us. Of course, it is natural to exert a certain degree of control within our direct spheres of influence, but wanting to direct everything from the greatest to the smallest thing is a dead end that leads only to frustration and exhaustion. So let's learn to recognize when we fall into these patterns of excessive need for control. Let's identify those situations that trigger in us the urgency to control everything, to protect ourselves from a potential threat. Then let's pause, take a deep breath, and ask ourselves, can I truly control this thing beyond a certain point, or am I unnecessarily creating stress for myself by trying to force what must follow its natural course? Let's remember that absolute control is an illusion, and often the best control is to accept letting go of what eludes us. Letting go is not resigning or abandoning. It's trusting ourselves to navigate best through life's inevitable unforeseen events instead of desperately stiffening wanting to foresee everything. It's also trusting the flow of life, that underlying current that knows where it's going even when our limited understanding cannot grasp everything. So when you catch yourself wanting to fix everything, organize everything, frame everything in a strict order, remember to breathe. Remember that it is the flexibility of the reed that allows it to bend without breaking under changing winds. Identify what you can truly influence constructively and let go of the rest in a spirit of openness and trust. For it is in this surrender of illusory control that inner freedom is found. Each time you manage to grasp this, you will detach yourself a little more from your anxieties. You will learn to live in peace instead of that perpetual tension of wanting to control everything. Detachment involves accepting that entire swathes of existence will always be beyond our grasp, but by stopping resisting this elusive mystery, we can embrace life in all its diversity without being trapped by our own rigid certainties. So let's practice this letting go day after day and let the magic of the universe carry us instead of endlessly rowing against its current with the illusion that we can one day control everything. It is in this surrender that true peace is found. Do not identify with your emotions. We all tend to cling too much to our current emotions. When we are angry, sad, or anxious, we feel as if this feeling will last forever. We cling to it. We ruminate on it endlessly. But our emotions are like the waves of the ocean. They rise and they fall. Allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by every emotional wave is like drowning in an endless cycle of attachment and suffering. Healthy emotional detachment is realizing that we are not our emotions. They come and go, but our essential being remains the same underneath, like the sky behind the clouds, unchanging. Concretely, this can mean, for example, not overreacting when anger or sadness overwhelms us. Observe this emotion with a little distance, saying to yourself, "Ah, there's that old familiar feeling again. It's temporary. It will pass." Instead of fully identifying with the emotion and indulging in it, we thus learn to let our moods flow like passing visitors without clinging to them. Of course, this does not mean denying or repressing them. Emotions are important messengers that must be listened to and honored, but without letting ourselves be possessed by them. We can fully feel our pain, joy, or fear while maintaining the awareness that they do not exhaust who we are in our totality. They are just temporary human experiences to go through. With practice, we will learn to observe the constant flow of emotions rising and falling without drowning in them or clinging to them desperately. We will be able to experience these waves with much more lightness. Because very often it is precisely our resistance to negative emotions and our greed for positive ones that make them persist and cause us to suffer more. The more we struggle, the more we feed attachment. So the next time a strong emotion overwhelms you, simply try to welcome it with conscious breathing. Tell yourself, "I see you there. Sadness, anger, fear. I feel you, but I do not identify with you. You will eventually pass like everything else, and let it go naturally without clinging to it or rejecting it. Content yourself with being the calm and loving witness of your experience of the moment." Over time, you will discover the freedom and peace that come from emotional detachment. You will no longer need to flee or fight against your moods because you will know that none of them have a definitive hold over you. Your life will resemble a vast and deep river where emotions are merely fleeting reflections on the surface, magnificent or troubled, but always changing. Unperturbed, you will learn to let them flow rooted in the certainty of who you truly are. Be present in the present moment. One of the keys to cultivating detachment is to remain anchored in the present moment. When our mind wanders into the past or the future, that is when it clings and suffers unnecessarily. We ruminate on regrets, grudges, and fears related to the past, or we stress by projecting imaginary scenarios onto the future. But neither the past nor the future truly exists. Only the present moment is real. To detach, one must therefore learn to constantly bring our attention back to the here and now. Feel the sensations of our body, observe what surrounds us with a fresh and curious mind. When we are truly present in the current moment, we realize that there is nothing to flee, nothing to ruminate on or to be anxious about. Everything is simply as it is in the immediacy of the experience. Of course, the mind tends to get lost endlessly in its own little world of thoughts and emotions, but each time we realize it, we can choose to let go and return to the present. Breathe deeply and feel the air entering and leaving concentrate on the sounds, colors, textures around us. This is immediately calming because it takes us out of our agitated mind. The more we practice this mindful presence, the more our detachment naturally strengthens, because in the bare present moment there is nothing to want to control or possess, just the simple and fluid flavor of the experience. We realize that we have never truly lost anything in the past, since the past no longer exists, and that we have nothing to fear either in the uncertain future that has not yet come to pass. All there is this moment of living consciousness sufficient in itself. By remaining rooted in that our needs, our fears, our attachments lose their hold over us. So let's practice full presence again and again, returning constantly to the only real anchor point that is the here and now, and discover the simple but profound fullness that emanates from this lucidity rooted in the moment. For it is only from this immutable base that we can truly welcome life in all its changes and let its dreams and mirages flow without clinging to them or fleeing them. This was Telemachus, and thank you for listening to Stoic Wisdom. If you are new here, I encourage you to subscribe, and here are 2 other videos that continue on this philosophy if Stoicism interests you.